So it's kind of a jolt. All of a sudden I go 15-hour different time zone, 15-hour difference.
就是突然是这种时区转换，就是15个小时的时区转换。
Yeah. So I took naps about every 6 hours in Seattle.
在西雅图呢，是每6个小时就稍微打个盹。
Mm. And then yesterday I was doing fine till about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I just went, wow.
昨天还蛮好的，结果到下午2点钟的时候就睡过去了。
But tonight, with Liu Qing's pushing me on here, and my coffee, and my throat, so we will do this.
但今天晚上的课呢，我拿一杯咖啡，拿一个那个润喉糖，然后旁边还有6群在给我打鸡血，所以我终于撑得过来了。
Oh yeah? Okay. I wonder what they're saying to that. Anything? Nothing yet. All right. We have 1 minute officially here.
还有1分钟开始上课。
All right. I keep thinking you should move over so they can see you. I want them to see you. It's just this voice coming out of nowhere, you know. It would freak me out. I would think they have ghosts just on door, you know. Okay. All right. Yes, the moon is still in Gemini.
对，月亮还在双子座。
Okay. A lot of you at this point are probably thinking, this is too much.
有很多同学到现在这个程度，可能会想说，哇，内容实在是太多了。
太多了 too much. We've learned transits, we've learned secondary progressions, and we've learned solar arc. Isn't that enough?
我们都已经学了行进了，然后支线推进也学了，太阳谱也学了，是不是都已经够了？
If it was enough, we wouldn't be learning this.
如果说已经够了的话，那么我们今天不会去学习这个内容。
Actually, return charts, which is what we're starting to look at tonight,
事实上，今天晚上呢，我们要开始去看反照图。
is really an older system, even, than solar arc, I think, and older in many ways than secondary progressions.
实际上，今天晚上我们看到的这个反照图呢，它是一种更加古老的系统。我认为是比这个太阳谱还有这个曲线推进都要更为古老的一种系统。
I know that return charts were used in medieval times, and I think they go back quite a ways, actually.
我认为就是这个反照图呢，在中世纪的时候已经人们在使用了，就是它可以追溯到很久之前的一个时期。
In my own practice, return charts, particularly solar return charts, would often provide me with additional information when I was uncertain about what was going on.
在我自己的个人实践当中，每当我对于一些事情不太确定的时候呢，这个时候反照图，尤其是太阳反照图，会给我提供额外的信息。
Sometimes you'll have the experience of, you'll be looking at progressions and transits and solar arc, and you may feel you don't have enough information. You may be confused.
有的时候，当你在看行进、支线推进、太阳谱的时候，你可能会感觉到信息不够，或你会感觉到有迷茫的时候。
Now it's true, you'll always be able to get some additional information from talking with your client.
当然了，你通过和客户的交谈，总是可以获取一些额外的信息。
But it's also good to have backup information, backup material in front of you.
但是如果有这种备份的信息，还有材料，有准备的话，当然也是很好的。
And so as my practice evolved and I worked with my astrological toolkit,
所以当我的这个职业进化的过程当中，我去就我的这个占星的工具箱去做工作的时候
there were times when I would reach for my solar arc tool. My solar return tool.
有的时候呢，我就会去看我自己的这个太阳反照的这样的一个工具。
Because a lot of times I just needed more information on the theme for the year.
因为有的时候呢，我需要对于当年的那个主题获取更多的信息。
Okay. Technically speaking, what is a return chart?
那么从技术上来讲的话，反照图是什么呢？
The most common return charts are, of course, solar returns and lunar returns.
当然，最普通的反照图就是太阳反照和月亮反照图。
Theoretically, you can do a return chart for any of the planets.
理论上面，你可以对于任何一个行星绘制它的反照图。
If you were 84 years old and you were having your Uranus return,
如果你今年84岁，然后呢，你的天王星回归了，
you could do one of those.
你可以去做绘制天王星的。
You only get to do one Uranus return.
你只有一次这个天王星的反照。
Now, I thought when I was 22 years old, I thought I had invented a new kind of chart when I was 22 years old.
我22岁的时候呢，我当时认为我发明了一种新的这个星图。
I was all excited.
当时我特别兴奋。
I had figured out mathematically, and I was not a really good at math, you know.
那当时我的数学并不好，但是我在数学上面呢，完全都已经把那个星图给计算好了。
But I had figured out by myself, you know, I was so excited.
我自己把它算出来了，我特别兴奋。
I figured out how to calculate each year the exact time when the sun would return to where it was in the zodiac when you were born.
我当时呢就自己算出来了，就是每一年这个太阳它会就是精确的回归在什么时间段在什么时间这个太阳会精确回归到你出生时候的那个太阳的那个黄道的这个经度。
And I started setting up charts by hand, you know, for these new times in the past when the sun had returned to where it was when I was born.
然后呢，我当时就开始去手动去设置一些星图，那这些星图呢都是过去每一年我的太阳精确的回到我出生时候呢太阳的那个准确的黄道经度的时间。
Okay. Now I called up my teacher, Rosemary Jones.
然后我就给我的老师 Rosemary Jones 打了个电话。
And I told her what I'd done.
我就跟她讲我做到的这些事儿。
She laughed.
她就笑了。
And she said, yes, those are called solar return charts.
她说对，你做的这个就叫做太阳反照图。
Astrologers have been doing that for a long time.
她说占星师们已经做反照图已经做了很久了。
And I thought that was interesting, but I knew, sadly, that I had not invented anything new.
然后当时我就很伤心，因为我发现原来我没有去发明什么新东西。
However, the fact that I had found these charts interesting, even without really knowing what they were, tells you the value of a return chart.
但是呢，当时我虽然不知道这些星图是干嘛的，但是呢，感觉到它们非常有意思。仅仅是这一点呢，就可以告诉你关于这个反照图它的价值。
Now, all the astrological software products that are on the market can calculate these return charts for you. Almost all the software you want to buy, Kepler and Solar Fire and so forth.
现在几乎所有的占星软件，无论是开普勒还是这个 Solar Fire， 他们都可以去帮助你去计算这个反照图，太阳的反照图。
I think eventually here at Nodor we'll have the solar return calculation down in our software. Do we have it? Do we have it now? Because we had some trouble with it. Is it working now? Okay. Here at Nodor we now have good software also for solar return charts.
现在我们乐道自己也有这种很好的软件可以去计算出太阳反照图了。
So you can go online, go on our site and calculate return charts. But we used to do them by hand.
所以大家现在可以到网站上面，然后自己去算一算这个太阳反照图。但是我们以前都是手动去算的。
Now, don't worry, on the ESAR exam, you do not have to calculate a solar return chart by hand. You do not.
大家不需要去担心这个国际占星协会的这个ESAR的考试，因为他们不要求你去手动计算太阳反照图。
However, if you were going to calculate one by hand, you would need to know.
但是如果你需要去计算一张太阳反照图的话，你需要知道的信息就是
You would need to know the birth position of the degree, minute, and second.
你需要知道就是你出生的时候，这个太阳它的精准的度、分和秒。
This list that you see here, showing the sun and moon and some of the planets, just shows you the degrees, minutes, and seconds of the natal position.
在这个地方，大家看到的这个列表呢，就是出生的那个时间，在那个出生图上面，太阳、月亮以及其他行星它们的度数、度和分以及秒。
I didn't put Neptune and Pluto on here because you can't have a Neptune return. It's 165 years.
165 for
no one's ever had one that I know of.
在这个地方我没有把这个海王星还有冥王星加进去，因为海王星呢，它的这个反照的话是165年，没有人可以活这么长。
对 ，and Pluto,冥王星 is 246 years.
那么冥王星的话，它回归要246年。
So I haven't met anyone that old.
所以我到现在为止还没有遇到过年纪这么大的人。
Maybe some of you have.
可能有些同学见过这么大的人。
Okay. But the two most common return charts again are solar and lunar.
但是两种最常见的反照图呢，一种就是太阳，还有一种是月亮反照。
Now here's something important to know.
有一点是非常重要的。
Unlike secondary progressions and solar arc, with a return chart, you use the place that or location that you're at the time of your birthday. Meaning
what?
The place,
yeah.
Like the city and country.
You use the city where this person is birth?
No, where you are. In other words, for example, if I'm living in Beijing and I'm here on my birthday, okay, I set up a solar return for Beijing.
Okay. 就是大家在设置这个太阳反照星图的时候呢，那一个出生的那个设置的那个地点就是你当下所在的那个地点。举个例子，比如说在生日那天呢，我是在北京，那么我设置我的这个太阳反照图呢，就把地点设置在北京。
So this is different than progression C.
那么这和这个次线推进是不同的。
And different than solar arc.
和太阳图也不一样。
There, on this page, for those of you who want to do the math by hand, there are instructions for doing the hand calculation.
如果同学们对于手动计算太阳星图感兴趣的话，那么我们这个地方给大家写了一个就是计算的步骤，大家可以按照这个计算的步骤来进行计算。
But you don't. It's not required. If you want to learn it, great. If you don't, that's fine as far as the ESAR exam is concerned.
就是如果大家想去学习怎么算的话，可以参考这里的计算的步骤。如果不想的话也没有关系。反正我们这个ESAR 的考试不会考这一项。
All right. What do you think a solar return chart shows you?
那么大家觉得太阳反照图会向我们展示什么信息呢？
A birthday is an interesting time.
出生时间呢，它是一个很有意思的时间。
Did you know that statistically that there is an unusual spike in the number of deaths that people have on or close to their birthday? Death.
大家知道吗？就是在这个从数据上来讲，就是人们的这个死亡率啊，就是死亡率的死亡时候的那个日期呢，就是如果是在那个离自己的那个出生日期附近的那个死亡日期，在数据上面呢，这个是比较偏多的。
My own father, who we're going to be talking about tonight, died on his birthday.
举个例子嘛，比如说我的父亲嘛，他就是在他生日当天过世的。
Now, that doesn't mean you need to get worried every time it's approaching your birthday.
当然，这句话的意思并不是说每一回你快过生日的时候，你就开始要担心了。
And it doesn't mean that most people die on or close to their birthday either.
这句话的意思也并非意味着大多数人都是在他们生日当天或者是生日附近的时间去
Don't
世
get the
的。
wrong idea.
所以不要理解错了。
But it is true that statistically there is a significant spike and that is not accounted for by chance with people dying on or close to their birthday.
但确实，我们从这个数据统计上面来看的话，就是在自己生日当天或者是附近死亡的这些人的这个比率呢要高一些。
And this suggests something that astrologers believe is true about solar returns.
那么这一点呢，就强调了就是关于占星师们认为这个太阳反照这个真实性的这样的一个观点。
Think about how important the sun is in your chart.
大家想想看，在你的星图当中，太阳是多么的重要。
The sun represents your will
太阳代表的是你自己的意志
and your vitality.
还有你自己的活力。
And those are pretty important things.
那么这是非常重要的两点。
If you're not feeling very vital, well, maybe you won't last.
如果你感觉到自己活力不充足的话，那可能你就撑不了多久了。
And the will means to be or not to be.
那么这个意志呢，它意代表的是说是存在还是不存在。
Okay. Now, that will, in a way, you can think of gets renewed every year. The sun and the earth return to the same position they were in when you were born.
大家可以想到，就是每一年当太阳重新回到你出生的时候，太阳所在的同样的位置的时候呢，你的意志都是一个更新的过程。
Okay. And that, of course, means that symbolically, whatever is happening at that moment, that exact moment, wherever you are on the globe, is a very important moment.
那么从象征的意义上来讲呢，就是那每一年就是当太阳回到你出生时候的那个太阳的同样的那个度数的时候呢，无论你在这个地球上面的什么时刻，那个时间点对你来讲都是相当重要的一个时间点。
And a chart calculated for that moment will symbolize what is important in your life then and over the course of the next year.
那么在根据那个时间点所设置出来的这样的一张星图呢，就会象征在你当时的那个生命期间之内，在接下来的一年的你这个生命期间之内，有什么重要的事情要发生。
Now, a solar return chart, again, only symbolizes the time frame from one birthday to the next.
那么一张太阳反照图，它的星图这个时间的有效期呢，就是从你的一个生日到下一个生日这期间的一年。
And keep this in mind, the sun may return to where it was when you were born, the day before your normal birthday, the day of your birthday, or the day after your birthday.
大家要记住这一点，就是每一年太阳回到它原先的那个度数的时候呢，有可能是在你生日的那个当天，有可能是你生日前一天，或者是你生日的后一天。
So your true birthday may actually occur not necessarily on your birthday.
事实上，你真实的生日呢，并不一定就是你的那个现在那个纸上面写着的那个生日。
Okay. All right. We're going to take a look here at the solar return chart for Walter Rayleigh, who was my father.
接下来呢，我们大家要去看Water Relay，就是我父亲他的这个太阳反照图。
And I'm going to take you through the steps of how you work with a solar return chart.
我会带大家一步一步的去看怎么样去解读这个太阳反照图。
Okay. The first thing about a solar return chart is that you consider the chart first by itself, meaning it stands alone by itself, before you compare it to the natal.
大家在看太阳反照图的时候，那么第一点，你是要将太阳反照图当成一个单独的星图来看待，然后之后你再去将太阳反照图和出生的星图进行比较。
And the most important feature, number one priority of a solar return chart is the sun.
在太阳反照图当中，最优先考虑的一个因素就是太阳。
The house position of the sun and how the sun is aspected is very important.
太阳所在的宫位以及太阳所形成的相位是非常重要的。
With that in mind, let's take a look at the solar return for Walter Rayleigh in 1951.
讲究刚才我说到的几点，我们大家现在来看1951年沃尔特瑞雷他的太阳反照图。
I like the way you say Rayleigh. Rayleigh. Okay. We can see at a glance that the sun is in the 7th house.
我们大家一眼可以看到太阳是在第7宫。
What do we know about the 7th house?
那我们大家知道关于7宫是一个什么样的意思呢？
We know the 7th house is the house of partnership.
我们知道7宫呢，它是一个关于这个合作伙伴关系这样的一个宫位。
The house of companionship and marriage, all those things.
所有的关于这个伴侣啊、婚姻啊这样的一个宫位。
If we knew that our client coming in to see us was married, then we might think, okay, the sun in the 7th house suggests that his married life is somehow that issues or circumstances in married life are important. We're having some technical difficulties here. There we go. Okay.
如果你的客户来见你，那你知道你客户是一位已婚的客户，那么你看到他太阳反照图当中，太阳在7宫，你就明白，那么在他的婚姻生活当中，现在出现了一些议题，或者是出现了一些重要的东西需要去看待。
Of course, the 7th house can also be business partnerships.
当然，7宫也可以代表的是这种商业的合作伙伴的关系。
You would immediately notice that the sun is in a close conjunction with Mars.
大家可能马上就留意到了，太阳和火星形成了一个紧密的合相。
And this would suggest to you that not only was partnership or marriage being highlighted in some significant way by the sun, but that there was also some action going on.
那么大家就会知道，那么在他的伴侣关系或者是婚姻关系当中呢，出现了一些被太阳强化了的这样的一个因素。除此之外，还有一些行动力的东西。
Mars means that someone is doing something. Someone feels an urge to take action.
火星代表的是一个人做一些事情，它代表的是一个人感觉到了这种紧迫感去采取行动。
It can mean that your client is going to take some kind of action and make some kind of decision. So the sun's the decision, Mars is the action about their marriage.
这有可能代表的是说，你的客户呢要去在他的婚姻上面去做出一些决定，做出一些行动。那么太阳代表的是决定，火星代表的是行动。
It could also mean that the partner, this person's partner, this person's wife, was going to make some kind of decision or take some kind of action.
这有可能代表的是这个人的伴侣或者是这个人的太太，她要去做出某一个决定，或者是采取某一个行动。
You don't know whether this action is potentially a positive action or one that is full of friction or fighting.
你并不知道这个行动它是一个积极的行动呢，还是说充满了这个摩擦跟冲突的这样的一个行动。
The temptation when you see Mars like this, as an astrologer, is to think, oh, there's some friction here. There's some fighting going on of some kind of fight maybe in his marriage.
当你看到这个火星的时候，作为占星师，你可能会想，在这个地方大家的这个婚姻当中呢，可能会出现了一种摩擦，或者是某种形式的争吵。
But you can't be positive about that because you don't know whether it's going to be positive or negative outcome or positive or reflect positive or negative issues. You don't know.
但是你并不知道到底这个客户他面临的是一个积极的还是一个消极的，一个正面的还是一个负面的一个行动或者是一个后果。
All you would do is you would ask your client, are you in the middle of making some important decisions in your partnership life? Is your partner considering anything significant at this point?
你唯一可以做的就是去问你的客户，那么现在当下你是否有一些关于你自己的伴侣关系，你需要做一些重要的决定的，或者是你的伴侣现在需要做出什么重要的决定的。
So let's keep going with our analysis here.
好，我们继续我们的分析。
How else is the sun aspected?
除此之外，太阳还有什么其他的相位呢？
We can see that there is a close sextile between the sun and Jupiter.
我们看到太阳和木星，它们也形成了一个紧密的6分相。
Let me get my little pen out so I can try to draw it here. That's simple. We can see that there's Jupiter, Mushing, right here. It's 7 Aries, the sun is at 8 Gemini, so we can see there's a little sextile there.
太阳是在8度的双子座，然后木星是在7度的白羊座，所以我们看到这边是一个6分相。
And we can see that there is a little semi-sextile with Uranus.
所以我们看到太阳和天王星之间呢也有一个12分相。
And so this square between Uranus and Jupiter
天王星和木星有一个4分相。
has the sun in between with a sextile to one and a semi-sextile to the other. So the sun kind of breaks up the square a little bit, you might say.
然后太阳呢是在这个4分相当中，太阳和木星形成了6分相，和天王星形成了12分相，所以你可以讲说这个太阳呢是就是插在这个4分相当中的。
But this means we have 3 planets, Mars, Jupiter, and Uranus, in aspect to the sun.
但是这就意味着是说，我们现在一共有3颗行星，那么火星、天王星还有木星都与太阳形成了相位。
So it's important to consider what these planets mean at this point in this individual's life.
所以非常重要的是呢，需要在这个个体他当下的人生当中呢，去考虑一下这3颗行星分别是什么含义。
Okay, so you might, if you were an astrologer and you're making notes before your client gets there, you should have already made notes about this. The sun's conjunct Mars, the sun is sextile Jupiter, sun is semi-sextile Uranus, sun's in 7th house.
所以如果你是一名占星师，在你的客户进门之前，你应该已经将刚才的这些做了笔记了。一方面呢是太阳和火星的合相，太阳在7宫，太阳和木星的6分相，以及太阳和天王星的12分相。
Okay. Now, the next thing you do is you begin to look, just like you would in a natal chart, once you've considered the sun, you begin to look for close aspects.
那么接下来你要做的事情，就像你在本命相星图当中那样去做的，你要去看一看太阳的紧密相位。
Because we all know that the closer the aspect, the more significant the issue is.
因为我们都知道相位越紧密，那么这一个议题呢，它就会越重要。
So let's take a look.
好，我们现在看一眼。
We already noticed that there was this square between Uranus and Jupiter that look pretty tight.
我们大家已经看到了木星和天王星之间的这个四分相是相当紧密的。
But there's one even more significant than that.
但是还有一个相位比这个更为重要。
See if I can make that go away. I guess that one won't go away. I don't know why it won't. It's okay. Back to my pencil. If we take a look at a faster moving body, which is the moon.
如果我们去看一颗这个运行较快的星体，就是看月亮的话。
And the reason I'm saying this is because everybody who had a birthday on May 30th had a Jupiter-Uranus square.
我之所以这样讲的原因呢，是因为每一个这个5月30号这一天，一年5月30号这一天出生的人呢，他们都是天王星和木星的四分相。
So it means something.
所以它确实是有些含义的。
And it's important, but maybe not that high on the list.
而且呢，确实挺重要的，但是可能它的这个优先顺序没有那么高。
Okay. The more important thing that we found so far has been the Sun and Mars in the 7th house.
那么更为重要的，我们到目前发现的呢，就是这一个太阳和火星的合相在第7宫。
I want you to follow my logic on this.
大家请跟着我的逻辑。
Well, we can see right away. I'm having trouble drawing this. This line is as curved as my jet lag.
我这边画了一条这个弯曲的线，这是代表我的这个时差的，所以才没画直。
All right. This is supposed to be a straight line.
本来应该是一条直线的。
I'm going to have to do something about that.
必须
I
裁
can't even get the eraser to work. That's funny. So that you can see that we do have an exact opposition between the moon and Neptune.
我们确实看到了在月亮和海王星之间有一个精准的对分相。
That's a close aspect.
这个是一个最紧密的相位了。
You can also see that Pluto
我们也可以看到冥王星
is at 17, so we have a trine between the moon and Pluto.
也是17度，所以月亮和冥王星之间也是形成了3分相的。
What else do we notice?
那我们还看到什么？
In terms of close degrees, we see the node at 15, moon at 16, Neptune 16, Pluto 17. Look at these close degrees that tie in with the node.
另外还有我们提到这个紧密的度数，我们发现焦点是在15度，海王星16度，冥王星17度，月亮16度，所以大家去留意一下这个月亮焦点。
And that's 14 at the bottom, so we can see that north node is right on the IC. Look at that.
还有这个下中天是14度，所以我们看到这个北焦点就正好坐在这个下中天的位置。
Okay. Now, suppose this person came to you, and these are not all the aspects you're going to notice, but I want to kind of move through this process because we got a number of charts to look at.
当然，这并非是大家留意到的所有相位，但是今天晚上我们还有其他的星次要看，所以我们先说到这里。那如果假设这个客户来见你的话
I mean, you would notice other things, of course, you know.
当然你还会留意到一些其他的东西。
You might notice that there is a wide square. It's like a little too wide, but a wide square between the moon and Venus. But it's six degrees.
此外，大家还会看到这个月亮和金星之间有一个容许度较大的一个6度的一个四分相。
And you might notice other little aspects, but so far we have observed the most important aspect.
大家可能还会留意到其他的相位，但是到目前为止呢，我们看到的列出来的这些相位呢，都是这个容许度很小的紧密相位。
And you have enough evidence for you to begin to think about it.
而且你已经有足够的证据在这个地方可以让你去思考一下了。
What would you think?
大家会怎么想呢？
Before your client comes in to talk with you, what are you thinking?
在你的客户进门和你交谈之前，你会思考一些什么呢？
I've just switched to looking at your question.
我现在在看大家的这个这个这个面板，就是打字的这个面板。
How about the ascendant and MC? Are they the same or is important?
MC is very important.
Yes.
MC 特别重要，是的。
对。
The close aspects in the solar or the solar return art is not just Ptolemy aspects, right?
That's true, but I like the Ptolemy aspects, but I also like the semisextile and the quincunx and.
日本盘的几名相位不只是托勒密相位吧？是的，当然了，我会去看托勒密相位，但除此之外，我也会去看这个12分相啊，还有这个梅花相位的。
My bias, as you know, because you know me as a teacher, my bias are aspects that resonate clearly with the 12 signs. The aspects, the zodiacal alphabet. The aspects that resonate with the 12 signs, meaning conjunction is Aries, semisextile is Taurus, sextile is Gemini.
那么我自己的话，看相位的话，都是去看这个和这个12个星座这个关联的这个相位，就比如说30度，就是这个白羊座是30度，然后再接下来的是60度，然后90度、120度这样子。
Is that for TNTN?
和甜甜。
For TNTN gets 3 red stars.
和甜甜下面他说的这个话呢，老师给了你3颗小星星。
This is a very good response. You're reading my mind and you're reading the chart very well.
那么你刚才就是跟着我的逻辑，并且你很好的在读这个星图。和甜甜说，月亮和海王星代表着女性的健康问题。
If I knew that my male client coming to see me was married to a woman,
如果我知道如果这个客户是我的一个男性客户，他来见我，并且他是和一位女士结婚了的话，
I would definitely be wondering about that Moon-Neptune opposition and what it implied, because already I see partnership is important. What about his wife?
我一定会去想到这个月亮和海王星的对分相会是什么含义，因为我们已经看到了他的这个伴侣生活是很重要的。那么他的太太是什么情况呢？
So that's very good. That's just very astute. Neptune always suggests that there may be some dysfunctional circumstances that are contributing to a challenge of some kind in the family, in the household, with the wife. It could be lots of different things.
海王星它可能会代表着一些就是一些功能失调的状况，因为这个功能失调带来的在家庭在这个太太这些层面所带来的挑战。
So if your client comes in and you begin a conversation with your client,
所以如果你的客户进来了，然后你开始跟客户对话，
you say to him, is there anything that you and your partner, you and your wife, are trying to decide or do together?
你会问他这样的一个问题：你和你的伴侣，你或者是你的伴侣，有没有现在要决定去现在要做出一些什么样的决定的？目前。
Now we know that this solar return chart is in effect from May of 1951, May 30th, through May 30th, 1952.
我们大家知道这张太阳反照图呢，它的有效期是从1951年5月30号到1952年的5月30号。
So let's say that your client has come in to see you in May or June of 1951, right around the time when this has gone into effect.
假设客户是在1951年的5月或者是6月，然后他来见你的，正好是这张太阳反照图生效不久后的一个日子。
Okay. And so, how does your client respond to this question?
那么你的客户会如何去回答这样的一个问题呢？
Your client responds as well. My wife and I are working together on building a house. We bought a piece of property and we're building our dream house, right? You know.
你的客户可能会跟你讲说，其实呢，现在我和我的太太2个人呢，正在去建造我们自己的房屋，我们2个买了一处房产，现在正想去打造我们的这个梦之屋。
Right now we're still living in an apartment.
现在我们还住在一个公寓里。
But on the weekends, we go to this piece of property that we bought, and my wife and I are building this house together.
但是周末的时候，我们两个人就会去我们买的这个房产这个地方，然后我们两个会一块儿去建造我们的这个房子。
We've already laid the foundation, and we're putting in the cement blocks.
我们这个地基都已经打好了，然后那个水泥土的混凝土的那个砖头什么都已经弄好了。
And of course, you know that this individual is an architect because he's either told you or when he made the session or you ask him, what do you do for a living?
你知道你的客户是一个建筑师，因为之前你们是沟通过，要不是他告诉过你，或者是你们就他的职业沟通过。
By the way, Jiang Jiajun. Another red star, maybe not 3, but you get at least 1 red star for the Mercury trine to the midheaven.
Okay. 张家军至少也得到了一颗小红星，因为他刚才说，他的这个问题，他说这个水星呢是3分的中间。
Because it does suggest some decisions or other issues about work and job and so forth.
确实是关于some decisions 吧，确实是关于他的这一个工作或者是职业上面做的一个决定。
New information about
信息。
Because Mercury is in the 6th house of job.
因为水星呢，它是在6宫关于工作的宫位。
And it is the ruler of the midheaven, or Virgo's there.
而且它呢是这个中天的守护星，中天的这个星座是处女座。
And the ruler of the 7th.
并且它也是7宫的守护星。
So you would want to make a note of that.
所以你肯定想要留意到这个。
Thank you.
这一点，谢谢你。
I meant to mention that one. I'm counting on you students supporting me tonight.
我本来也想说的，但是呢，我是想今天晚上让大家踊跃发言，然后来去支持我的。
So your client in 1951.
所以你的这名客户呢，在1951年。
First thing he tells you is that he and his wife were building their dream house. When you think, okay, Pisces in the 4th here, this North Node in Pisces, looks like a dream house.
他告诉你的第一件事情呢，就是他跟他的太太2个人呢，正在打造一个梦之屋。那么你说，哇，这个梦之屋，你就看到这个下中天是这个双鱼座，并且呢，北焦点是双鱼座。
And the moon is opposite Neptune, so there's another statement about dream house.
并且呢，月亮是对分了海王星呢，这又是另外一个关于梦之屋的表达。
You hear that and you think, well, that's very interesting.
那你听到这一点呢，你会觉得哇，挺有意思的。
It makes sense to you.
讲得通。
Then he tells you something else.
然后他又告诉你一些别的事儿。
He says, yeah, and there's something else going on too that just started.
他说，还有一些别的事儿在发生，才刚刚开始。
And I have mixed feelings about it.
对这件事情呢，我的感受是百感交集的。
My wife, she has epilepsy. She's had it since she was 12 years old.
我的太太呢，从她12岁开始就患有癫痫。
I mean, she looks perfectly fine, and she's an athlete, and she's, we have 2 kids, but she's had epilepsy, and occasionally she'll have spells.
那个我们有2个孩子，然后我的太太也是一个运动员，平时也没什么事儿，但是她有癫痫，偶尔会发作。
And she recently read about a doctor.
最近呢，我的太太听说了一个医生。
A neurosurgeon.
是一个神经外科医生。
Who claims that he can cure epilepsy.
这个外科医生呢，他声称说他能够医治癫痫。
And she is interested in visiting him.
然后我的太太就很想去拜访这位医生。
To see if she is a candidate for this new procedure that he has.
看看自己能否成为这个医生的这样的一个新的治疗方法的其中的一名成员。
And immediately, as an astrologer, you're going to look at this chart and you're going to think, wow, okay, I get the building the dream house thing, but wow, the moon is opposite Neptune, and the Sun and Mars are in the 7th. This seems like a big decision to me. His wife is trying to trying to heal Neptune, trying to heal something's wrong with her.
当你听到这样的话的时候，你会觉得，刚才说的那个梦之屋的话，我还是挺能理解的。但是呢，它的月亮是对分的海王星，太阳呢合向了火星在第7宫，那么这就代表着，他们要做一个很大的决定，因为这个他的太太呢决定要去治愈他身上的一些这个健康问题，那么这个治愈呢就是海王星了。
Now you think, okay, she's checking out some kind of new procedure, some kind of new surgery. You think, well, Mars is the planet associated with surgery, and Mars is conjunct the Sun in the 7th, so partner, wife, is considering surgery.
你会想到说，他现在在考虑一个新的疗法，新的外科手术。那么现在呢，这个火星它代表的是外科手术，然后火星合向了太阳在第7宫，所以是他的伴侣，他的太太现在在考虑做这个外科手术。
And then you think, Mars is conjunct the Sun, but remember the other two planets that were aspecting the Sun, Jupiter and Uranus.
你想到了说，那么火星是合向太阳的，但是呢，要考虑到还有另外2颗行星也是和太阳形成相位的，那一颗就是木星，还有一颗是冥王星。
This is a new procedure that is being publicized. Jupiter is publishing, Uranus is something new.
这是一个新的手术方法，有新的被这个宣传的一个手术方法。那么被宣传的这就是木星了，然后新的的话，这个就是天王星。
Okay. So, how do you advise your client?
那么你会去给你的客户提一些什么建议呢？
You say, well, what you're telling me is reflected in your solar return. I can see how what you're describing fits.
你可以对他这样讲，就说，刚才你对我描述的情况呢，挺符合你的太阳反照图的。我感觉到，你的情况跟你的太阳反照图的这个所显示的东西是挺搭配的。
But you might also say, this seems like a big deal to me. This seems real important.
你可能也会说这样的一句话，就是看起来这个决定挺大的，看起来它是一个非常重要的决定。
And it's such a big decision. I think you and your wife need to approach this, with a lot of caution, give it a lot of thought.
而且是如此重大的一个决定，我觉得你跟你的太太呢，应该去多多考虑一下，然后再去做出决定，要去三思。
And then you say what you would say in 1951, which is, I am just an astrologer, I'm not a doctor.
然后你会说，你在1951年你会说的这样的话，就是我是一个占星师，我并不是一名医生。
Maybe this procedure could heal your wife. Maybe it could.
也许这样的一个疗法可以去治愈你的太太，也许可以。
But I'm not sure.
但是我并不确定。
I think it's something you need to examine carefully.
我觉得这是你需要去仔细去调查的、研究的一个东西。
And your client might say to you, well, I intend to be very careful about this.
那么你的客户可能会跟你讲说，我打算要很小心的对待这件事。
Already, my wife and I have argued about it.
我太太跟我2个人已经对这个事情争论过了。
Because she really wants to be able to drive a car.
因为我的太太特别想开车。
And she can't drive a car and have epilepsy because she's afraid she'll pass out behind the wheel.
但是我太太呢，因为她有癫痫，她想开车，她又害怕，因为她怕在她开车的过程当中癫痫发作。
And so she just wants to have a normal life like everybody else.
我的太太只是想和其他人一样有一种正常的生活。
Okay. Now, at this point, you might even talk about other things.
那么到这个点上呢，你们2人可能已经去谈论其他的事情了。
You might talk about career, normal things that you talk about with every client.
你可能会去跟他讨论一下职业呀，以及其他你会和其他任何的一个客户会讨论的问题。
You might even say, well, there's a good chance you may move over the next year because there's this dream house they're building. They may move into it.
你可能会跟他讲说，可能下一年你有很大的几率要搬家，因为他们两个现在正在打造这个梦之屋。
There's certainly potential for some new development as far as your home is concerned.
而且呢是就是在你的这个家庭这方面呢，肯定是有一些新的发展出现的。
Okay. I might even ask questions about the house they're building. Is it near water? Is it near a lake? Is it near a stream? Is there any danger of flooding?
我可能还会去问他类似于这个房屋的问题，就会问他，你这个屋是不是在这个这个水旁边造的？你旁边是不是有湖啊，有河啊？然后会不会有这一个洪水的危险啊？等等。
He might say, well, it is right next to a stream, but it's above it.
他可能说，这个屋子确实是在一条河附近的，但是它是这个地势还是比较高的。
It's a very small stream. I don't really think that it's ever flooded.
而且呢，那条河是挺小的一条河，我觉得它不会发洪水。
And then, of course, you would want to do or have done the thing before he got there, which is to compare his solar return to his natal chart.
然后呢，接下来你可能要去比较，或者你已经比较过了，就是在他进门之前你已经比较过了，就是他的太阳反照图和他的出生星图的一个对比。
And let's do that. I want to move ahead to this. Because that's just the solar return again. The P is there, so here we go. Okay, here it is compared to the natal.
好，我们现在看到的就是出生星图和太阳反照图的一个双额星图。
Now, the first thing that really gets your attention when you compare the solar return, which is in the outer wheel, with the natal, is that the ascendants are not only the same sign, but almost the same degree, they're 1 degree apart.
当你去把这个出生的星图和太阳反照图这样对比的时候，马上抓住你眼球的第一点就是你发现这一个上升点，太阳反照图的上升点不仅仅是和出生星图的上升点是在同一星座，并且它们两个只有1度之差。
This is very significant.
这一点是非常非常重要的。
Does not happen very often.
这种情况并不常见。
Think about it. There's 360 degrees in the zodiac. What are the odds of the ascendant of your solar return being within 1 degree of where it was when you were born?
大家想想看，这个黄道它一共是360度，那么你的这个太阳反照图上面的这一个上升点的度数和你出生星图当中上升点的度数只有1度之差，这种几率能有多少？
Remember, the natal chart is the most important chart.
要记住，出生星图是最重要的一张星图。
And here we have 2 things being duplicated about the natal chart.
那么出生星图的两个东西都在这里被复制了。
We have the sun in the 7th. We have the ascendant almost the same degree.
一个呢就是太阳反照图中的太阳和出生星图的太阳都是一样是在第7宫。此外，太阳反照的上升点和出生星图的上升点只有1度之差。
This means that decisions that are made are strongly tied in with the life story this next year.
这意味着在目前所做出的这个决定呢，和接下来1年它的这个人生故事紧密的连接在了一起。
And when you look at this natal chart, you think, well, okay, what is the significance of him being born with the sun in the 7th house?
当你看到他的出生星图的时候，你会想，那么这个人他的本命的太阳是在第7宫，这有什么重要的含义呢？
You see that the North Node is in Libra in the natal chart.
本命星图当中北焦点是在天秤座。
Everybody born with the North Node in Libra is interested in partnership.
每一个北焦点在天秤座的人都是对于伴侣关系是感兴趣的。
They may spend their whole life trying to figure it out.
他们可能就花这一辈子的时间来把这事搞清楚。
But they're interested in sharing their life with others.
但他们是感兴趣的是将自己的人生和其他人分享。
They're interested in building relationships.
他们对于建造关系这件事情感兴趣。
And if we look at Venus,
如果我们看一下金星的话，
we see that he has Venus in the 8th house, square the node.
我们看到他的金星是在8宫并且4分的交点。
You see that 6 degree,
大家看到这边是6度，
and then 6 degree.
金星也是6度。
Down here, 6 degree. So there we have the square. It's very interesting, isn't it?
所以我们看到这边是有一个很有意思，这边是个4分相。
We see that Venus is conjunct. We see that Venus is conjunct Pluto
我们看到金星是和冥王星合相的，
in the 8th house.
合相在第8宫。
Now you might ask him
你可能会去问他，
about his marriage.
询问他的婚姻，
How long have you been married?
你结婚多久了？
He'd say at that point, almost 7 years.
他说，到现在大概7年了。
At that point, it would have 51. It would have been 6 years. 6 years.
51年是6年了。
And you say, well, did you know her a long time before that?
然后你会问他说，在这个结婚之前，你们俩认识很久之前就认识吗？
And he would say, well, we started dating 11 years ago.
他说，我们两个是11年前开始约会的。
And we were engaged several times.
我们订婚了好几次。
We broke it off and back on again.
分手又在一起，分手又在一起。
And we broke up many times during that 5 years.
5年间我们俩分手了好多次。
And then we got married and nobody thought it would work out.
然后我们俩结婚了，就是没有人觉得我们俩的这个婚姻能成。
But it's been great.
但是挺好的。
She's a great wife. I love being married.
她是一个很好的太太，我特别喜欢，我特别爱这段婚姻。
I think if you asked him in 1951, that's what he would have said.
如果你这样51年你去问他这个问题的话，他会这样回答你。
This is someone he was married to someone that he loved intensely and passionately.
他和这个他结婚的这个人呢，是他非常深深的爱的，并且充满激情的爱恋的这样的一个人。
Which is often the case with relationships that are on again, off again during the dating phase, you know.
通常在这个约会的这个期间，分手又在一起，分手又在一起，就会出现这样子的情况。
The statement.
里面金星合相，natal Venus conjunct Uranus of the solar return chart.
So when you compare, I love you jumping ahead. I love it. When you compare the solar return.
本命金星合相日反天王，老师说的很好。当你去这个对比本命和日反图的时候。
You are correct. I'm just going to be giving away a lot of red stars tonight. That's all there is to it.
今天晚上我得给出好多小星星了给大家。
We see Uranus is conjunct Venus in terms of comparing the solar return to the natal. 我们把出生星图和日反图比较的时候，我们发现这个日反的天王星是合相本命金星的。This is a new development impacting or affecting partnership relationship life. 这是一种影响这个伴侣关系或者是这个婚姻关系的一个新的发展。You could think a lot of things when you saw that. 当你看到这样的一项目的时候，你可以想到很多东西。You could think maybe he is in danger of having an affair. 你可能会想说，他可能现在有危险，可能要有外遇了。Or being, because Uranus can bring out impulsiveness. 因为天王星会带来冲动。Or maybe his wife is thinking of having an affair. 或者他的太太现在正想着有一段这样的外遇。Even if you try not to think about it, those are normal things that are going to go through your crazy astrologer brain. 即便你的生活中没有发生这样的事情，但是呢，类似的情况总会让你的这个疯狂的这个占星师的大脑里面会过一遍所有可能的情况。Even though you're going to be smart enough not to say that. 即便你很聪明，你不去讲这个事。Which is why you're having a discussion with him about his relationship life. How are things? Is everything okay?
所以你的占星师和这个客户才会有一场关于他的这个关系的交谈，就是说他的这个关系现在好吗？一切都没问题吗？
And he says, yeah, we're doing fine. The only thing right now, we have a little tension about this doctor thing, but everything's great.
他会跟你讲说啊，一切都挺好的，除了就是我们现在就是在这个医生这边，就这个医生这边可能会有一些紧张之外，我们其他都挺好的。
Right. And so he's happily married.
所以这个男人他是很幸福的在婚姻当中的。
He's not interested in anybody else.
他对别人不感兴趣。
And she's not interested in anybody else.
他的太太也对别人没兴趣。
As far as you can tell.
就你所掌握的信息。
All right. So maybe something that's normal for me to do when I have a client and they're married and they have kids, I like to get charts on the whole family. I want to get the birth data on everybody.
如果说我有这样的一个客户的话，他也是已婚已育的情况下，我可能会想去看到他们全家所有人的这个星图。
So if you have a new client coming in to see you, if you can get the birth data on everybody, excuse me, on the wife or husband as the case may be, and on any children, it can be very helpful.
所以，假如说这个人是你的一个新客户，如果你能够去搜集到他的全家，就是包括是太太，还有丈夫，还有孩子们他们的这个星图的信息的话，那会是很有帮助的。
Okay. That's normally what I do. That's why I end up with these big fat files on all my clients.
那通常我就会这样做，就是为什么我的这个客户档案的那个文件是厚厚的一大叠的。
Oh, look. Well, he was 29 that year. That's right, having his Saturn return. Also about 1/3 circle of Uranus. What's the difference between transit Uranus and solar return Uranus?
专家就问，那么那年他29岁嘛，大概这个天王星走了1/3圈了。那么行进的天王星和太阳反照的天王星有什么区别？
You're right. This is a very astute question.
你很正确，这是一个相当敏锐的问题。
A solar return will certainly reflect the transits you are having.
这个很明显的这个太阳反照，它会去折射出你当下所有的这个行迹。
During this period of his life, he's having Uranus transiting Venus.
那么在他的这个时间这个阶段呢，他的这个天王星和他的这个金星是有这样的一个行进的关系的。
So there's no difference between solar return Uranus and transit Uranus in that sense.
所以在这个意义上来讲呢，行进的天王星跟太阳反照的天王星是没有区别的。
Except
除了
here we see that the natal chart houses are duplicated by the solar return.
在这个地方我们看到这一个本命星图当中的这个宫位的这个信息呢，是被太阳反照图当中的这个宫位这个同样的宫位是被复制过来的。
And again, that tells us something about this being an important year.
那么这个宫位同样被复制这一点呢，也告诉我们这一年是相当重要的一年。
Okay, so here we have a picture down here of my parents in this was roughly 1945, 46.
下面这张照片呢，是大概在45年、46年我的父母的一张合影。
Okay, and let's take a look at the wife's natal chart and her solar return.
好，接下来我们来去看一看他太太的出生星图，还有他的太阳反照图。
This is my mom's birth chart right here, Agnes.
这个是我的妈妈安格尼斯她的出生星图。
There's a lot of very important aspects in this chart.
这个星图当中有很多相当重要的相位。
Those of you who have studied this have probably spotted the fact that she has a Moon, Mars, Sun T-square.
研究过这张星图的同学可能已经发现了，我的妈妈呢，在这个月亮、这个火星还有Sun，还有这个太阳之间是有一个 T 三角。
If I could draw the line correctly, it would be the square, the T-square between Moon, Mars, and the Sun, you know.
大家看到这个三个行星之间的 T 三角。
And it's true, she grew up in a volatile family situation. Her father had died when she had been killed in an accident when she was around 3 years old.
我的妈妈她确实是出生在一个比较动荡的家庭，她的爸爸呢，在她3岁的时候就因为一场事故而去世了。
Or maybe a little younger even. Actually younger than that, maybe 2 years old.
应该是2岁的时候就去世了。
Okay. And her mother had remarried.
她的妈妈是再婚的。
And the stepfather was difficult. He was an ex-prize fighter. He was also a drunk.
Prize fighter?
A professional fighter. And a drunk. Not a good combination.
那么他的继父呢，也是一个很难相处的人。他是以前是一个职业的一个 boxer， 他是以前是一个职业的拳击手，并且他还是一个酒鬼。
Whom her mom basically had to support. He only worked intermittently at jobs, you know.
Working what? Intermittent?
Meaning he didn't have regular work. He worked, but the breadwinner was the mom.
Okay. 所以他的继父也工作了，但是家里面主要的经济来源是他的母亲。
Okay. And so she grew up in a difficult family situation.
所以埃格尼斯她是在一个相当困难的家庭里面长大的。
And at the age of 12, she had an epileptic seizure.
12岁的时候她就癫痫发作了。
Okay. Now, I've done a lot of research. I shouldn't say research. I've done a lot of studies about epilepsy in the charts of my clients and others over the last 40 years because of my mother having epilepsy.
因为我的妈妈有癫痫的这样的一个状况，所以在过去的40年当中呢，我就是在我的这个客户的星图当中，对于这个癫痫这样的一个病症呢，也做出了我自己的一个研究。
And there are different kinds of epilepsy.
癫痫有很多不同的种类。
Some epilepsy can be caused by injuries to the brain.
有些癫痫是因为大脑损伤而造成的。
And there are things that can happen during birth that can create potential for epilepsy. There's all kinds of things.
还有出生的时候的一些状况也可能会导致癫痫的发作。总之，癫痫它的病因有很多种。
And the onset of some kinds of, meaning the beginning of some kinds of epilepsy will occur around the time of puberty.
那么癫痫的首次发作的时间呢，可能是在这一个青春期的时候会发生。
Which is the kind of epilepsy my mother had.
这种癫痫就是我妈妈的癫痫。
In that her first seizure was right at the same time of puberty, around 12 or 13.
那我妈妈首次癫痫发作就是在她那个青春期发育，也就是说12岁、13岁那个阶段首次的。
Which means that hormones were a trigger, part of the trigger mechanism that affected the brain.
这意味着说，就是当时她这一个荷尔蒙呢，就是部分的去触发了她的这个大脑的癫痫反应。
So we see in her natal chart, Mercury, which is neurological, is almost exactly opposite Pluto, which has to do with hormones.
我们在她的出生星图当中呢，我们看到这个水星几乎是和冥王星精准的对分享。那么水星它代表的是神经方面的，那么冥王星呢，冥王星代表的是荷尔蒙。
Anyway, if you've ever seen a seizure, an epileptic seizure, it is not a pretty thing.
如果你们曾经见过这个癫痫发作的病人的话，那并不是一个看起来很好的东西。
It is a neurological event that looks like a trauma.
就是它这样看起来就像它是一个这种神经系统的一种发作，看起来像是一个创伤。
It's very much a Mercury-Pluto event.
它真的是一种这个水星和冥王星有相位的这样的一个事件。
The nervous system and the brain is in a state of crisis.
神经系统还有这个大脑呢遇到了危机。
And so she suffered from this, and I have seen others with epilepsy who also have Mercury-Pluto aspects.
所以我的妈妈她是有这方面的病症，然后我也看到了其他的水星和冥王星对分的人呢，他们有类似的这种癫痫的症状。
But I've also seen epilepsy with Mercury, Uranus, and Mercury, Neptune.
但是我在这个水星和天王星以及水星和海王星的这个相位上面，也看到过有癫痫的病症的例子。
So my suspicion is that the dominant aspect that would be more common amongst epileptics would be Mercury-Pluto.
但是我在讲呢，就是最常见的这个癫痫的这个症状的这个相位呢，应该是在水星和冥王星的这个相位之上。
Okay, but that's not research. That's what I would call simply an anecdotal study. Meaning it's based upon limited cases, maybe, I don't even know the number, but I mean, I've done over 20,000 charts, but
所以呢，这个并非是我的一种这个研究的结果而是说基于我过去的看过的这个将近有2万张星图，我自己得出来的这样的一种基于有限的数据的一个结论。
Okay, all right. This is a question.
Someone saw one time a person had epilepsy and this person was scared and the person was dying.
Yes. So I used to see them when I was a kid. So I mean, I grew up seeing them. So you get used to it, believe it or not, as awful as it is.
这个云商说他曾经见过一个人进行发作，然后老师说他从小就见到，所以都习惯了，就不管看起来有多糟糕。
Yes. All right. Let's take a look at her solar return.
好，我们来看一下她的太阳反照图。
Here we go. This is the solar return that would go into effect from December 51 through December 52, which would be about 6 or 7 months after his birthday.
这个太阳反照呢是51年的12月到这个52年的12月这样的期间。
Look at this. The sun is conjunct the descendant.
我们大家来看一下这个反照图当中的太阳是合向了它的下降点的。
Another statement about the year being important in terms of her marriage and partnership, just like her husband.
就是又是一个就是对于她的这个婚姻关系、伴侣关系，这个关于丈夫这一年又是被强化的一年。
But how is the sun aspected?
那么太阳相位呢怎么样呢？
There's not a lot of aspects to the sun.
和太阳有相位的并不是很多。
Not close, anyway.
并且也不紧密。
We've got Pluto kind of widely trine the sun.
我们看到呢，冥王星呢是和太阳形成了一个容许度较大的三分相。
And Neptune is very wide, sextile, 6 degrees is kind of wide.
并且呢，这个海王星呢也是和太阳形成了一个6分相，但是6度的容许度也是比较大的。
So the sun is kind of relatively unaspected other than this conjunction to the descendant and some of the little wide aspects that's got.
所以太阳除了这个和下降点的这一个合相，以及和其他的行星的这一些容许度较大的相位之外，没有什么其他的相位了。
Okay. So then we look for other close aspects.
那我们再去看看其他的紧密相位。
We see Mars is down here closely conjunct Saturn.
我们看到这边的火星呢和土星形成的紧密的相位。
And that Mars is also square Uranus.
并且呢，火星呢是4分的天王星。
And that's interesting.
那这点很有趣。
Uranus suggests an urge to take a risk.
天王星代表的有一个这个就是冒一个险的冲动。
But Saturn means caution.
但是土星代表的是谨慎。
We see that Mars and Saturn are in the 4th house.
我们看到火星和土星是在第4宫的。
So we know from talking with the husband that they're, over the next year, they're thinking about moving into a new house they've been building.
我们通过和丈夫的谈话呢，知道他们这个现在正在打造他们的梦之屋，那么接下来1年要搬进去。
This idea of moving into a home is also reinforced by the moon in the solar return conjunct the IC.
这种要搬新家的这个想法呢，也被太阳反照图当中的月亮合向了这个下中天这一点所强调了。
And so we might conclude in looking at this, we might think, well, you know, I see a little bit of instability from the Mars-Uranus square.
你可能会从刚才所得到这些信息当中得出这样的结论，就是从这个火星和天王星的这个四分相呢，我看出来了有一些不稳定的因素。
And I see the sun is opposite the ascendant on the descendant, so we have that. You know, meaning the sun is here. The opposite ascendant conjunct descendant.
并且呢，这边的太阳呢，它是合向了下降点对分的上升点。
But there's nothing overly alarming about this chart.
但这张星图并没有什么就是让人警觉之处的。
It does seem to support the themes that were present in the husband's chart.
它确实是看起来似乎是支持了她的丈夫的星图里面出现的主题。
You know two things. You know that moving is possible, and that decisions being made in the marriage look very important. Look like it could have a strong or lasting effect upon the marriage.
那你看到2点，第一点呢，就是说搬家这个事情是很有可能的；第二点就是说他们在婚姻当中要做出这个决定是相当重要的，会对于他们的将来的这个生活产生一个长远的一个强烈的影响。
And then of course you know that because of before the husband came in, you got the birth data of the family that there are 2 children.
那么在她老公过来找你之前呢，你知道他们还有2个孩子，你有这个全家人的这个出生的星图信息。
There's a boy, which is my chart.
他们有一个男孩，这就是我的星图。
And there's my first birthday.
这个是我的第1个生日。
October 1951. There's my solar return for 1951.
这是我1951年的太阳反照图。
Okay. Now, the sun is in the 7th house.
太阳在7宫。
Jesus, everybody's got the sun in the 7th house in this family. What's going on?
我的老天爷啊，这一家人所有人太阳都在第7宫，到底怎么回事啊？
Now, I'm not married. At this point, I'm a year old.
那么这个时候我才1岁，所以我不可能结婚呢。
I sure don't have a business partnership going on.
而且我也肯定没什么商业合作伙伴。
Even though I was precocious, meaning I did things early.
当然，我是一个早鸟，我什么事情都做得比较早。
But I was just a year old, so I didn't have a business or anything.
但是当时我才1岁，所以我并没有做什么生意之类的。
All right. But notice this. The moon, Yuleg, conjunct the ascendant in Aries, full moon, opposite the sun.
但是大家看这边的这个月亮，它是一个满月，它是在19度的白羊座合向了上升点，并且对分了太阳。
Not only is it opposite the sun, but the sun is conjunct Neptune, and Neptune is opposite the moon, or the moon is opposite Neptune.
月亮不仅仅是对分了这个太阳，太阳合向了海王星，海王星也对分了月亮。
Where did we just see in a solar return chart the moon opposite Neptune?
我们刚才在那个太阳反照图中看到什么？月亮对分海王星。
Do you remember?
大家还记得吗？
Here.
这边
Look.
大家看，
In the dad's solar return.
在爸爸的这个太阳反照图里。
So wow, we got the dad's got a moon Neptune opposition, and so does the sun.
所以你看，老爸的有这样的一个月亮和海王星的对分相，儿子也有这样的一个对分相。
And in the sun's case, this moon Neptune opposition is not only exact, it's right on the damn angle.
那么在儿子的这张太阳反照图当中呢，月亮和海王星不仅仅是形成了一个精准的对分相，并且他们两个还非常精准的处在了四轴的位置上。
If you see something like that, it's important.
如果你看到类似于这样的东西的话，是相当重要的。
It means something important is going on with mom and dad.
这意味着是说，爸爸和妈妈两个人的身上有些很重要的事情要发生了。
The sun is dad, the moon is mom.
太阳呢就是爸爸，然后月亮是妈妈。
And the moon figures very prominently here.
然后在这张星图当中呢，月亮的位置是相当显著的。
And so something's going on with mom.
所以妈妈有事儿发生了。
Something of a Neptune nature. Mom that wants to get healed.
一些海王星性质的东西，妈妈想要得到治疗。
What about moving? Does anything show up about moving with this kid?
那在这个孩子的星图上面有展示出关于搬家的什么事儿？
Everybody's talking about moving.
大家都在讲搬家。
Look at this.
看看这个。
Right, Uranus conjunct the IC.
那天王星合相了下中天。
Every weekend he's in the stroller with parents going over to work to build their house.
然后每一个周末呢，爸爸妈妈都带着他在那个婴儿的手推车里面，都带着他去那个新房子那儿。
Okay. All right. Very interesting.
很有意思。
All right, now let's keep going.
好，我们继续。
Here is the chart compared to the natal chart. This is the solar return of the boy, my chart, compared to the natal.
好，接下来这个呢，就是那个1岁的男孩，就是当时我1岁的时候，我的本命星图和太阳反照图的对比。
Again, I'm only a year old, so a lot of the outer planets are very close to the natal.
当年呢，我才1岁，所以说很多的这个外行星和在太阳反照图当中的位置呢，和我的这个本命星图当中位置呢相差不多。
We can see that this Uranus at 13 is exactly square Venus in the natal chart at 13.
我们大家看到这个太阳反照图当中的天王星呢，是精准的四分了本命星图当中的金星。
So this again, the Venus is a secondary indication of mom.
金星呢是母亲的第二指证。
We see that Venus and Neptune are conjunct at birth, and that Venus and Uranus, of course, are square at birth.
我们看到呢，它的这个星图当中的金星和海王星是合相的，然后金星和天王星是四分的。
This is suggestive of more unusual developments in the life of the mother.
这展示了在母亲的生命当中的一些不同寻常的发展。
Or a potential for unexpected developments.
或者是出乎意料的发展。
That impacts socialization in regards to women.
然后会影响，因为这些出乎意料的发展影响了他与女性的这种社交的关系。
And here they're talking about Mercury, are they? Or what are they talking
about? Venus, Saturn.
Venus, Saturn.
Saturn, Venus, think so.
Saturn's up here. Saturn's conjunct Mercury.
那么在这个地方呢，土星是合相这个本命的水星的。
And I don't have a job at that point.
但是我1岁的时候还没工作呢。
But again, this could be an impact on health, maybe my health.
有可能是对于这个健康的影响，可能是我的健康，我不知道。
Somebody's missed something. I wanted you to see this. Look where Mars is.
大家请看一下火星的位置。
Mars in the solar return chart is square the moon, the natal moon.
反照图当中的日版图当中的火星呢是四分了本命的月亮。
Only 2 degrees from the square.
然后这个只有离这个精准的四分相只有2度之差。
That would add a little bit of concern because we know Mars is conjunct the Sun in the solar return chart of the father.
那么这个呢就会让人多一些担心，因为呢在父亲的这个太阳反照图当中呢，他的太阳和火星是合相的。
So it increases the potential for something disruptive to occur.
所以他就会去就是强调了有一些毁灭性的这样的一个东西，这样的东西的产生，损害性的这样的东西产生的可能性。
In comparing the solar return to the natal, we also see that the moon and ascendant fall in the natal fourth, which again suggests a change of residence.
那么在它的日版图当中呢，月亮和上升点都是在4宫的，所以这又是暗含了一个这个改变住所的可能性。
Now let's look at the sister's chart.
好，我们再来看她姐姐的这个星图。
This is the older sister, my older sister's solar return. And notice that it's for January of 52, because the events we're going to look at occurred in the first quarter of 1952, in January through March.
我们大家看一下，那么姐姐的这个星图当中的这个日版图呢是52年1月份的，那么接下来要发生的这件事情呢是在52年的第1季度，也就是说1到3月当中发生的。
Again, what gets our attention is the sun, in this case, only is 3 degrees approximately from the descendant, but the sun is again conjunct the descendant. We have a family of 4 people. Okay. In every chart, the sun is in the 7th house or conjunct the descendant.
那么大家看到在姐姐的星图当中，这个太阳呢，它也是这个是合相的这个下降点呢是有3度之差。那么我们大家看到这个家庭一共有4个家庭成员，每一个家庭成员他的这个星图当中，要不然就是太阳在7宫，要不然就是太阳合相下降点。
Now, my sister's only 4 years old. She's not married.
当年我姐姐才4岁，她又没结婚。
She's not getting married.
也不会准备结婚。
So what can the 7th house mean for babies and little children?
对于一个小宝宝来说，小孩子来说，那么这个7宫会代表什么含义呢？
The 7th house is about primary relationships in the sense of people that you're close to.
7宫呢代表的是一种你和你的亲近的人之间的这种主要的关系。
Or things that occur that may impact how you are socialized.
或者是说发生一些事情，它可能会去影响你社交的一些事情。
What about the moon in my sister's chart?
那么我的姐姐的星图当中的月亮又怎么样呢？
In the father's chart and the brother's chart, we had the moon opposite Neptune.
父亲和弟弟的星图当中呢，月亮都是对分了海王星的。
What do we have here?
那我们在这里看到的是什么？
We have the moon conjunct Neptune.
这边的月亮是合相了海王星的。
On the angle, look at that Neptune right on the IC, people.
并且呢还是在4轴上面，大家看到了吗？这个海王星就端坐在这个下中天上。
These are some very close aspects.
这是相当紧密的相位了。
And again, it suggests, because in the son's chart, in the father's chart, in the daughter's chart, we have boom, 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 moon Neptune.
所以我们在这个爸爸的，还有弟弟的，还儿子的，还有这个女儿的星图上面，都看到了3重这个月亮海王星的强调。
All pertaining to issues affecting the mom or the wife in terms of a healing or medical condition or medical or healing process.
全都代表着是说，在这一个母亲或者是妻子的这个身上会出现一个关于这个一个医疗的治疗、医疗的过程这样的一件事情。
In addition, we have Mars conjunct the moon or the moon conjunct Mars.
除此之外，我们看到月亮和火星的合相，
In the 4th house.
合相在4宫。
Now we know, again, that this family is moving.
我们知道这家人要搬家了，
Moving into their dream house.
搬到他们那个梦之屋去了。
Here's a moon-Neptune conjunction on the IC. That sounds like dream house.
因为它这个月亮和海王星的合相，并且合相在这个下中天，确实是一个梦之屋。
My sister remembers going over to the house that they were building and helping sweep up the foundation with the sawdust and things like that. She remembers that. I'm too little to remember.
我的姐姐她还能记得，就是当年她就是到我们那个新房子那个地基的地方，然后去扫一扫那个地基上的那个尘土之类的。我当时太小，我记不住，她还能记得。
Okay. And so, we see again a theme repeated throughout the family. That's the point I want to make.
对，我想跟大家所说的一点就是说，这一家子都有同样的一个主题在强调。
You might notice other things. I'm sure some of you have noticed that Venus in this chart is trine the midheaven and trine Pluto. So we have a little grand trine with Venus.
那么此外的话，我们大家还可以留意到其他的相位，这个金星和midheaven， 金星和这个中天，还有金星和冥王星，它们都是形成一个三分相的，所以我们看到这个三颗行星之间形成的三分相。
Well, again, my sister at this point is only 4 years old. I don't think she's going to win a beauty contest.
但是我姐姐现在才4岁，她肯定不是会获得什么选美冠军之类的。
So I suppose she could at 4. I mean, they have these days in the U.S. they have these horrible contests. They didn't back then, but
就是如果她现在的话，可能就要赢了这个选美比赛的一个冠军了。那个年代还没有。
But there is contact between Venus, Pluto, and the midheaven. So it again suggests, since Venus is secondary mom or female, that something significant seems to be happening with the mom.
但是我们看到金星、冥王星还有中天，它们三者之间都是有联系的。所以金星呢，它又是关于母亲和女性的第二指征，所以我们还是看到了在母亲身上要发生什么事情。
Then we can compare the natal chart of my sister to her solar return.
然后接下来我们把我姐姐的出生星图和她这个太阳反照图作为一个对比。
Immediately we noticed that, wow, her natal rising sign is Leo, just like her solar return. Her natal rising sign is Leo.
Yeah. Oh, I see.
The same sign, though 9 degrees apart, of her solar return.
我们看到我姐姐她的这个本命星图上面的上升呢是狮子座，那么她现在的这个太阳反照的上升也是狮子座，虽然有这个9度之差。
So even though it's not as close as a 1 degree like the dad's chart, we do have the same sign rising.
虽然这个不如像爸爸的那个星图当中这个反照的这个上升和出生本命当中的那个上升1度之差，但是它的这个反照当中的上升和本命的上升还是在同样的星座。
If we compare this to the natal, this also means that the ascendant at 1 Leo is square within 3 degrees the natal moon.
我们在这里还看到它的反照图当中的上升点是4分了它的本命的月亮有3度之差。
Mars, which is conjunct the moon in the solar return, is 5 degrees from being, or within 5 degrees, opposing the moon, out of sign, but opposing.
然后在这个太阳反照图当中的这个火星是合向太阳反照图中的月亮，并且呢是对分了它的本命的月亮，当然是有这个4度有4度的这个4度之差，但是虽然也是一个换座的一个对分相。
We do see that Venus in the solar return is conjunct the natal Jupiter.
太阳反照图当中的金星呢是合向了本命星图当中的木星。
So there's a potential for other developments there that might be beneficial.
所以有可能会有其他的一种发展，那其他的可能带来益处的这种发展。
This is obviously this question from TNT.
和田先生问说，有没有任何的这个指征，他会去暗示了他的妈妈这个手术结果的。
I think probably the most accurate thing we could say to that question is that the family pattern suggests that this is a vulnerable time for the mother.
我觉得我们就是能够讲到的这个最精致的这样的一句话，就是说你们现在这个一家人呈现出来的这样的一种模式呢，会暗含了对于母亲来说，现在是一个脆弱的时期。
The thing that would torture you as an astrologer, if this is your client,
如果这是你的客户的话，那么如果你是他的占星师，会折磨你的一个方面就是
is you don't know whether this all indicates that mom is right for wanting to go and be healed of her epilepsy, or whether she's putting herself in further danger to do so.
你让你作为占星师折磨你的一件事就是你并不知道，那么这个妈妈她去这个进行这样的一个想去进行这样的一个手术的过程，是否这个决定是正确，还是说她的这样的一个决定让她置于更大的危险当中
Okay. And so, but based upon this repetition of theme, I think a good astrologer, had there been one around at that point, like maybe Mark Edmund Jones or somebody, would probably have said, you know, you just need to proceed carefully because it looks to me that the mother is in a vulnerable period.
这个在当年呢，还是有这个好的占星师的，比如说是那个Mark Edmund Jones。如果是这样的一个占星师，他应该会对这个客户讲说，你在这个时期呢，你需要特别小心，因为看起来呢，妈妈是处在一个相当脆弱的一个时间段的。
Okay, and so when the mother goes to the doctor, to the neurosurgeon,
所以当妈妈去见这个医生，见这个神经外科医生的时候
she goes a number of times. She goes like 6 times, let's say.
她去了好几次，她去了6次了。
And he says to her, my diagnosis of you is that you do have the kind of epilepsy that makes you a candidate for this procedure.
这医生他说，我对你的这个癫痫的诊断呢，就是显示你可以成为我们这样的一个外科手术的其中的一名接受诊治的患者。
And she says, what are the risks?
然后我的这个妈妈她就问了，她说那么风险是什么
And he says, the risk is that you will end up exactly as you are now.
然后这个医生他说风险就是说，手术结束完了之后呢，你跟现在的情况没有什么区别。
If I do this brain surgery,
如果我做这个大脑的神经外科手术的话
and it does not cure your epilepsy,
如果它没有办法医治你的癫痫
you will be exactly as you are now.
那你就是完全就会跟你现在的样子。
This is what he told her. This is exactly what the doctor said.
这个就是那个医生这就是那个医生就是当时跟我妈的原话。
This doctor had a high reputation.
这个医生他当时是有一个很高的声望的。
Not just locally, but nationally.
他不仅仅是在当地，他整个国家都享有很高的声誉。
He was a protege of the #1 neurosurgeon in the world. Protege means protege, which means he was the #1 student, had been taught by the #1 neurosurgeon in the world, Wilder Penfield.
他那个时候呢，他还是世界上的这种最出名的这个首席的神经外科医生的这个弟子。
If you were to do research yourself on neurosurgery, you would find that Dr. Wilder Penfield was the #1 pioneer of neurosurgery in the world at this point.
如果你去对于这个神经外科手术做一些研究的话，那么你就会发现，那么就是这个医生他的这个老师，他当时呢就是处在这个神经外科手术的一个先锋者。
And that therefore the neurosurgeon that my mother is consulting is his #1 student.
所以我妈妈去见的这个医生呢，他就是这一个鼎鼎大名的这个专家的弟子，大弟子。
In some people's minds would mean he was maybe one of the #2 in the world at that point.
在一些人的心目当中呢，就是这个医生呢，他应该是这个世界上的排名第2的这个神经外科手术的医生了。
He's tall, very impressive.
他长得特别高大，然后就是给人留下深刻的印象。
Very persuasive.
而且他说服力也很强。
My father did not like him.
我的爸爸不喜欢他。
My father went back to see him many times.
我的爸爸回去见了他好多次。
During the process of my mother visiting him and being analyzed and so forth, tested.
我妈妈去见他，然后做各种的检测，然后去分析的整个的这个过程当中，我爸爸去见了这个医生很多次。
But my father just didn't feel good about it.
但我爸爸就是对他这个人感觉不好。
But my mother decided that this is something that she wanted to have done so she could be normal, like every other woman, and drive a car and things like that.
但是我妈妈特别想让自己的这个病得到治疗，她就想像所有其他的女人一样过一个正常的生活，能够开车。
And my mom, she is a Scorpio rising.
而我妈妈是一个上升天蝎座。
And when she made up her mind that she wanted to do something, there wasn't anybody who was going to tell her otherwise.
当我妈妈打定主意做一件事的时候，没有人能够去改变她的主意。
Right. And so she decided she was going to have this procedure, and she did.
所以我的妈妈她就决定接受治疗了，然后她就接受了治疗。
And the procedure did not go well.
这个手术过程并不顺利。
In fact, the neurosurgeon had made some diagnostic mistakes.
事实上，这个外科医生呢，他在诊断的时候出了一些错误。
He didn't know that my mother, for example, was born left-handed.
比如说，他并不知道我妈妈生来是一个左撇子。
And had been forced to use her right hand in school.
我妈妈是在学校里面被迫使用右手的。
Which is what they did back in those days.
那个年代，他们就会这样做。
And so her brain was actually organized differently.
所以我的妈妈其实她的大脑的组织是和其他人不一样的。
And things were not where they would normally be with a normal right-handed person.
并且呢，我的妈妈她的这个大脑和一个正常惯用右手人的大脑是不一样的。
This was a huge error or mistake on the part of the neurosurgeon.
那么这个就是这个外科医生他犯了一个极大的错误。
Anyway, the result of it was this, that when my mother regained consciousness,
但无论如何，这个手术结果是这样的：当我的妈妈恢复意识之后
in the hospital after the surgery,
这个手术完了，她在医院
she could not talk,
她就话也讲不了了，
and she could not move,
动也动不了了，
except her arms and hands would move spastically.
除了她的这种手和胳膊能够这么去抽动几下之外，
And obviously she could not walk.
很明显她路也走不了了。
Now, at that point, which was obviously extremely alarming to everybody,
那个时候呢，当然就是让所有的人都警觉起来了。
the doctor told my father that this was a temporary result of the surgery and that it would go away.
我的那个医生就跟我爸爸说，这个是这个术后的一个暂时的反应，那么这个反应会消失的。
But it did not.
但并没有消失。
So my mother could not walk.
所以我妈妈就走不了了。
She could not feed herself.
也自己饭也吃不了。
She could not talk.
话也说不了。
And she still had epilepsy.
而且她的癫痫还在。
Which was hardly what the doctor had said was the risk.
所以这个完全就和这个医生当初讲的那个风险根本就不搭。
So now, my father, let's go back to his chart.
所以我们现在回到我的父亲的星图。
Has quite a crisis on his hands.
你看我的父亲现在呢，面对是一场极大的危机了。
His wife is completely incapacitated.
他的妻子呢是处在一个完全的这个瘫痪的状态。
As if she has been attacked by someone.
就好像他的妻子被人攻击了似的。
Which would be the negative extreme of a Sun Mars in the seventh house.
这个就是一个太阳、火星合相在七宫的一个极端的例子。
She has been
极端的消极的例子。
She has been deceived by the doctor.
妈妈被医生欺骗了。
The doctor has behaved dysfunctionally.
医生并没有去以一个正常的医德来去表现他自己。
and as we would later find out, has lied to her deliberately.
并且我们后来才发现，这个医生是刻意在对我的母亲撒谎。
Which I will explain to you in a minute.
我马上会给您解释一下。
So it wasn't just the doctor trying to do a good thing who made a mistake.
这并不是说是一个想要去做好事儿的医生犯了个错误而已。
It was a doctor who deliberately lied to the patient.
而是一个刻意对于病人撒谎的医生。
And in fact, my mother almost died on the operating table. In fact, she did die and they brought her back. In other words, she died and they brought her back.
事实上，我妈妈在手术台上就是已经死过去一回，然后是他们后来又把她给救了回来。
Anyway, my father now had some hard decisions to make.
总之，现在我的父亲现在有一个艰难的决定要做。
He's got a wife that can't move.
他的太太现在动不了了。
He's got 2 children.
他有2个孩子。
And he has a job. He's got a full-time job.
而且爸爸还有工作呢，他有一个全职的工作。
And he was in the middle of building a house that was almost finished.
而且他现在还有一个建了一半的这个房子呢，已经快建好了。
And now he's got all these medical bills.
现在这个又出现了巨额的医疗的账单。
On top of the fact that he's in the middle of this crisis with the woman that he loves.
而且更别提，现在他处在这样的一个危机当中，他深爱的一个女人出现了这样的一个危机。
And my father described a situation shortly thereafter when they're home from the hospital, and he's getting some help from his mother-in-law, you know, to help out, and because he's got to work. And somebody's got to take care of the kids. And my mother had a severe seizure. She had an epileptic seizure, an attack.
那后来呢，就是那个时候就是我爸爸他的岳母，然后过来也帮忙，因为爸爸要这个他有工作，然后还有2个孩子需要照顾。然后在那个期间呢，妈妈还有严重的这个癫痫的发作。
And my father calls the doctor on the phone.
然后我爸爸就给那个医生打了电话。
And tells him what's going on.
去跟他描述了一下情况。
And the doctor said to my father, "Call an ambulance. I don't make house calls."
然后这个医生是这么回复我爸爸的电话，他说：“你去叫救护车，那个我不会去，不要再给我打电话。”
So here's what happened.
所以发生的就是这样的事情。
My father did think about killing this doctor, I can tell you. Killing him.
Did think about it.
Did think about it.
我爸爸当时真的有想过杀了这个医生。
You know, but his father-in-law stopped him from doing it.
但是他的岳父阻止了他这样做。
Because his father-in-law knew it wouldn't do any good.
因为他的岳父知道这么做也不会带来什么好的后果。
Instead, there was something actually unexpectedly beneficial that happened.
事实上呢，还有一些这个出乎意料之外的一些这个有益的信任的事情发生了。
Suddenly my father, someone told my father of a new program for rehabilitation for brain injury and spine injury at a major hospital in New York City.
就有一个人呢，就是告诉我爸爸，在这个纽约的一所大医院呢，针对于这个大脑损伤还有脊柱损伤呢，有这样的一个新的项目正在进行。
And so my father was checked into it and immediately applied for this to be a part of this new research program.
然后我爸爸马上就去找到了这样的一个信息，并且马上就去申请了成为这样的一个新的研究项目的一员。
This program was supported by the state of New York, of the New York State.
那么这个项目呢，是由当时的这个纽约州来资助的。
It was brand new, and they were looking for candidates like my mom.
当时这个项目是一个崭新的项目，并且呢，他们正在寻找像我妈妈这样子的一个这个参与者。
But this meant they would have to move to New York City.
但这样的一个决定呢，意味着他们必须要搬到纽约。
And my father would have to find a job there.
并且我爸爸必须要在纽约找到工作。
Now my father was working as an architect for a firm in Atlanta.
当时我爸爸呢是在亚特兰大的一家这个 公司呢做建筑师这样的工作。
But he applied for a job as an architect with a firm in New York City.
但是呢，他就去在纽约申请了一家这个公司，也去做建筑师的这样的一个职位。
And he said, I got it instantly.
他说我马上就得到了这个工作。
Here's the Mercury in the 6th house.
这个是水星在6宫。
Trine the south node, trine the midheaven.
3分了南焦点，3分了这个中天。
And he gets a new job.
他得到了一个新的工作。
Unfortunately, because of all their medical bills, which were huge,
很不幸的，由于就是所有的这些医疗的开支是相当庞大的一个开支。
and because they were going to have to move to New York City,
并且因为他们必须要搬到纽约，
they had to sell their dream house
他们必须把他们那个梦之屋给卖掉，
and never got to live in it.
而且从来没有住到那个地方过。
My sister was sent to live with the grandparents, the father's parents,
然后我的姐姐呢，就是被送到爷爷家去住了。
and I went to live with my great aunt,
great aunt，
great aunt on my mother's side.
然后我呢是跟我的这个婶，就是我妈妈那边的这样的一个亲戚去住了。
My great aunt was might as well even confuse you more.
姨婆，我跟我的姨婆去住了。
My great aunt was my grandmother's sister-in-law.
Grandmother's sister-in-law, which grandmother?
My mother's mother's sister-in-law.
然后我的这个姨婆呢是我的外婆的这一个妯娌。
Right, yes. And she was from England.
是从英国来的。
Not that matters. Except that as a little boy, I had an English accent by the time I was 4 because I lived with her.
就是当时我才4岁，所以我跟她住在一起，我就有了英国口音。
And she taught me to read and write so that by the time I was 4, I could read and write. So she.
所以我的这个姨婆她还教我去这个读书写字，所以我4岁的时候就能读书写字了。
So guess what happened? Everybody moved.
所以你猜怎么着？这个全家所有人都搬家了。
My mother and father moved to not their dream house, New York City, where my mother would be living in a hospital.
所以我爸爸和妈妈搬家了，搬到纽约去了，然后去住在纽约的一个医院里面，所以大家都搬家了，不是搬到那个梦之屋去。
Undergoing rehabilitation. Does this sound like Neptune or Pisces to you?
而且呢，妈妈是进行一个康复的这样的一个过程，听起来是不是很海王星跟双鱼座啊？
My sister is now living somewhere else. She's living with her grandparents.
然后姐姐呢是和爷爷奶奶住在一块儿了。
And I'm living with my great aunt.
然后我呢是跟我的姨婆住在一块儿。
Everything has changed.
一切都变掉了。
And with the wisdom of hindsight, and looking at these solar return charts, and looking back at this period of family history, all of this sort of stuff looks like it was fated to happen.
那么我们用这种后见之明呢，然后去看到这个全家人的这个太阳反照图呢，好像看起来说一切都是命中注定要发生似的。
But it was not fated to happen.
但并非是命中注定要发生。
It simply seems that way with the wisdom of hindsight.
只不过呢，我们是用这个后见之明去看待有这样子的感觉。
My mother could have decided not to have the surgery.
我妈妈当年本来是可以决定不去做这个手术的。
That would have been a decision.
但是即便如此，这个还是要在当时做出的一个决定。
And my mother would have still had epilepsy.
那我妈妈之后还会有癫痫。
And not been able to drive.
并且不能开车。
And we would have moved into the house that they were building.
并且我们也会搬家，我们会去搬到当时他们正在建造的这样的一个家。
That's just not the way it happened.
只不过当时这种可能性没有发生。
But it could have happened that way, and it could have happened a variety of ways.
但是这种可能性也是可能发生的，就是可能性有很多种。
I remember discussing this with my teacher many years ago.
我还记得很多年前我跟我老师讨论过这个情况。
Like 40 years ago.
是40年前。
And my teacher said, yeah, and the little stream that ran by the house they were building might have flooded and all of you would have drowned.
他说我老师这样讲，他说对啊，你们那个新房子下面不是有条河吗？可能所有这个河它会发大水，然后把你们所有人都淹死了。
But Again, she was trying to make a point to me,
但是我的老师他这么说是想阐明一个观点，
which is how difficult it is to predict,
就是说你要去预测是多么困难。
even when the symbolic evidence is so heavy.
即便就是这个地方的这个象征的这些指征都已经是如此的反复的被强调了。
If you have a client and they say one of the top neurosurgeons, maybe the second best neurosurgeon in the world, has said, that my wife is a candidate for the surgery, who are you as an astrologer to say, don't trust the neurosurgeon?
因为如果你的客户过来跟你讲说全世界排名首席的或者是排名第2的这样的一个神经外科医师说要接纳这个我太太去进入到他的这样的一个医疗的项目当中去，那你作为占星师你又是谁能够去讲说不要去参加这个项目呢？
Now, my clients have learned to trust me over the years.
那我的客户这么多年他们已经学会相信我。
And when I tell them to ask their doctors questions, they'll do it.
当我去跟他们讲说去问他们医生一些问题的时候，他们会这样做。
They don't care what their doctor says when they tell them I'm asking you this question because my astrologer told me to.
他们并不会因为是占星师让他们去问问题，他们就不会去问问题，他们才不管呢，他们会去问的。
But it sure wasn't that way in 1951.
但是在1951年情况并不是这样。
And in fact, had somebody said that to this doctor, he would have said, well, we're going to have this astrologer arrested for fortune telling.
事实上，如果当年如果有人去跟我的这个父亲去讲这样子的话，让他去问这个医生问题的话，可能这个医生会说，那我们是不是喊人把这个占星师给抓了？他是一个算命的。
But if I think of a really good astrologer, like I mentioned a while ago, Mark Edwin Jones,
但是我想到了当年的很好的占星师，比如说我刚才提到的这个马克·埃德蒙德这种的琼斯。
I do think Mark Edwin Jones would have probably said to my father, if my father was his client.
就假如我的父亲是这个马克他的这个客户的话，我想马克应该会对我的父亲讲。
He would have said, well, everybody's charts look, in terms of your wife and their mom, this looks like a very vulnerable time for her, and I would be just very cautious in moving ahead with such a complicated procedure.
他会对我的父亲讲，就是说看起来所有人，还有就是孩子的妈妈们，就是你太太的星图当中都展示出来了，他现在处在一个相当脆弱的时期，所以说我建议呢，你在这个进行这样的手术的这个事情上面呢，这样复杂的一个事情上面，还是要万分小心才是。
But in those days in the United States, doctors, especially neurosurgeons, were considered to be like gods. This was when science was so popular. You can't imagine.
但是在当时那个年代呢，就是人们会把这个神经外科医师这种人视为是一种神一般的存在，在那个年代，这个科学被大家是一个尊崇为是真理的年代。
But the point of my sharing with you these solar return charts is so you can see how useful they are in describing the atmosphere that exists at a given time in a person's life.
但我之所以今天晚上会跟大家分享这件故事的原因呢，是我想让大家去看到这个太阳反照图在一个人的他这一生的一个指定的时间段内，是可以多么有效的去描述出当时他处的那一种环境那种氛围。
There's a very clear, distinct pattern in these solar return charts, is there not?
那么在这些太阳反照图当中都会出现一个相当清晰的模式，对不对？
A pattern that reflects not only the conditions and the potential that was there when your client came to see you, when my father came to see you.
那么这种模式呢，不仅仅是清楚的指明了就是我的父亲过来这个当时的那个时期，他面临的一些状况，以及他面临的几种可能性。
But patterns that are suggestive of both positive potentials and negative potentials.
那么这个模式呢，它同时预示了这个积极的，也有这个消极的、正面的和负面的可能性都是存在的。
And as it turned out, my mother would go through this rehabilitation program for close to 2 years.
那后来呢，我的妈妈就在这样的一个康复的项目当中接受了将近2年的治疗。
And she did regain the ability to talk, the ability to feed herself, but she never regained the ability to walk.
我的妈妈确实恢复了说话的能力，她也能够自己为自己吃饭了，但是她后来就再也没有站起来过。
And so she remained in a wheelchair
所以她后来就一直是坐轮椅了。
for the rest of her life.
她后来的这一辈子都在坐轮椅了。
Which ended up being for another 57 years in a wheelchair.
也就是说，后来她接下来的57年都是坐在轮椅之上的。
Okay. And so, and my mother and father did stay together.
我的爸爸和妈妈他们2个后来还是在一起的。
As a married couple.
他们还是作为一对伴侣，然后在一起的。
Despite the circumstances.
即便是遇到了这样的状况。
Okay. Even though I'm sure that there was hardly a day that went by that my father didn't want to leave. And I think my mom wanted to get out of that chair and run across the yard. You know what I mean? So.
当然了，就是肯定是我的爸爸他也会去想着有离开的时候，然后我的妈妈她也想着去离开这个轮椅，想健步如飞。
What are the questions right here?
不同相位。In the solar return chart, different aspects mean different things. Is there anything like challenging aspects or harmonious aspects, the difference between those, or just contact?
I think always the first order is contact.
这个同学问的问题是日版图中不同相位意义是否一样，有没有挑战相位、合约相位之说，是不是2个行星的接触？老师说要考虑的第一点还是行星之间的接触。
And this is a good question.
这个问题很好。
And then after you have the contact, you see the contact.
在你看到这个接触之后
You want to think about it, you know.
你要去思考一下这个接触。
And you want to go back and look at the natal chart.
你要回去看他的本命星图。
And you want to think, what is the natal story of this person?
你要去思考一下这个人他的这个本命星图当中展示了一个什么故事。
And how does it tie in with these planets?
那么这个故事和所有这些行星的联系又是怎样的
And sure, the harder aspects are going to get your attention.
很明显，如果这个相位它越是一个挑战相位的话，越是引起你的注意力。
But much will depend upon how those planets are expressed in the natal chart.
但是更大程度上是依赖于所有的这些行星在本命星图当中是怎么样表达自己的。
You know, if you look at my father's natal chart.
比如你看我父亲的本命星图。
And let's do that. Let's go back to that. You can see it in the middle here. You can see that he was born with Venus square the nodes and Venus conjunct Pluto in the 8th house.
大家看到这个本命星图当中的这个金星是 square the nodes， 金星是4分的焦点，并且是合向了冥王星的。
对。And as some of you may have noticed,
有些同学可能也看到了。
The sun in the 7th is square Uranus.
七宫的太阳是4分了天王星的。
Yeah. Now who knows? I don't know. So you never know how things might have turned out. It could have been had my mother not had this surgery. It's possible that even though that my father loved my mother very much, it's possible that they could have any number of things might have developed further along the way. My father might have met somebody else, they could have divorced, any number of things might have happened.
就是谁知道呢？就是有很多种的不同的可能性，都可能会显化出来。就即便是我妈妈没有去做这个手术，有可能呢，我爸爸可能就是到后来可能会遇到其他的人呢，他们可能会离婚啊，或者有其他各种各样的可能性会发生。
You know, because you see the sun in Gemini in the 7th square Uranus.
因为你看到了太阳是在七宫的双子座，并且4分了天王星。
You know, And my father was a flirtatious man. He was a flirtatious man. He was outgoing and he would flirt with women. Sun Uranus.
而且我的爸爸他是一个这种就是愿意跟这个女人们调情嬉闹的这样的一个人，因为太阳双子座西宫这个4分天王星。
And his Venus-Pluto conjunction in the 8th house certainly suggests why he would be attracted to a woman who has Venus in Scorpio and Scorpio rising.
那么他的这个金星和冥王星的合相也展示出来，他为什么会受到一个金星在天蝎座上升是天蝎的女性的吸引。
I'm sure they were a very passionate couple.
我很确定他们两个是很有激情的一对夫妇。
Okay. So we don't know what would have happened.
所以我们并不知道到底是什么样的可能性会显化出来。
My father used to say something that I've heard from almost everybody who has South Node in Aries, North Node in Libra.
那我爸爸曾经说过一句话，那么这句话呢，是我几乎是从任何一个南交在白羊、北交在天秤座的人的口中听到的这样的一句话。
Part of me likes being married, part of me doesn't.
他跟我讲，他说我自己有一部分想结婚，有一部分不想结婚。
I've had so many clients say that to me. My father used to say.
我好多的客户都跟我讲过这句话，然后我爸爸就跟我讲过这句话。
In his case, you can understand that. He's got South Node in Aries, Mars in Sagittarius in the first house.
那么在这个他的例子中，你是可以理解的，他的南交点是在白羊座，并且呢，火星是在射手座，在B宫。
This question is from Phoebe. What's that?
In the solar return house, whether the sign of the planets is important, whether we need to consider the signs of the planets.
Well, obviously, the sign of the sun is the same every year.
很明显，因为太阳的星座每年都是一样的。
But it's you consider the signs a little bit, but it's I think more the houses and aspects, the signs a little bit certainly.
星座是考虑一点点，但更重要的你要去看的是它的宫位，还有它的相位。
What? Right. No, that's what I said. So it's the house position of the planet and the aspects, probably a little more important than the sign. I did find it interesting that my father and I both had the moon in Aries on our solar returns, and it was my mother's head that was cut open in surgery.
就是对任何行星，就是在反照图当中呢，日反图当中呢，就是这个宫位和相位都比星座要重要。然后我还发现有点很有趣，就是在我和我父亲的日反图当中呢，都是发现那个日反图当中的这个月亮白羊座。当然，因为在当时的外科手术当中，我的母亲的头是被切开的。
Now, we're at the end of our lesson for tonight, but I want to point out some things that will make you again recognize some fundamental truths about astrology.
我知道我们现在今天的晚上的课已经接近尾声了，但是我还是想提一点，就是能够说明我们这个占星学的一个基本的真相的。
All of you know my natal chart. I am a Libra sun with the moon in Sagittarius.
大家每个同学都知道我的星图，我的是太阳是在天秤座，然后月亮是在射手座。
Think about it. My father is the sun in the 7th house, moon in the 9th.
大家看看，我的爸爸月亮在7宫，他的太阳在7宫，月亮是在9宫。
Sun in the 7th is like sun in Libra. Moon in the 9th is like moon in Sagittarius.
你看这个太阳在7宫就像是太阳在天秤座，而月亮在9宫就像是月亮在射手座。
The pattern of father is repeated in the sun.
父亲的模式被儿子重复了。
I have Sagittarius rising, my father has Sagittarius rising.
那我上升是射手，我爸爸的上升也是射手。
But the one I really wanted you to see is the interchangeableness, this interchangeableness of sign and house.
我想让大家看到的就是这个宫位和星座它们之间的互相可互换性。
My sister's is an interesting in comparing it to my mom's.
然后我的姐姐她的星图和我的妈妈对比，和我妈妈的星图也是很有意思的。
Okay. See if we can get to my sister's. Okay, here we go. Sister's natal chart is in the is in the center here.
这个中间的这一圈是我姐姐的这个本命的星图。
My mom had Scorpio rising.
我妈妈上升是天蝎。
My sister has Pluto conjunct the ascendant.
我姐姐呢是冥王星合相上升点。
Which feels a lot like Scorpio.
那感觉还是很像很天蝎的感觉。
Okay. And of course my sister had South Node in Scorpio.
然后我姐姐的南焦点是天蝎。
Okay. My sister has the moon in Taurus.
我姐姐是月亮是金牛座。
My mother had a second house sun.
我妈妈的太阳呢是在第二宫。
Okay. My mother was a Sagittarius.
我的妈妈是个射手座。
My moon is in Sagittarius.
我的月亮是在射手座。
All right. Just showing you house and sign stuff. Okay.
对，这样会向大家展示这个宫位宫位和星座的互相互换性，互相可交换性。
Okay. And let's see. Just to add to it. I want to go back and look at my mom's chart. The moon is in the 10th house. Let me go back to my mom's chart. These are just things to think about. You can do this with your own family tree. You should create an astrological family tree. It's a fascinating and important thing to do.
大家可以去自己去做一个你的这个占星的这个家族树。你做的时候肯定是一个很有意思，也是很重要的这样的一个举动。
Anyway, let me say this one last thing and then we'll call it a night.
好，那我最后再说一点，然后我们今天晚上的课就结束了。
What happened?
发生了什么事儿呢？
When my father was in New York,
我爸爸在纽约的时候，
he was talking to one of the doctors at the hospital.
他就跟当时医院里面的一个医生去交谈。
Understand, my mother's been going through rehabilitation at that point for going on 2 years.
那个时候呢，我妈妈要在那个康复的中心待2年。
And the doctor looked at my father and said,
那个医生看着我爸爸说
I don't know who did this to your wife,
我不知道是谁对你的太太做了这样的事儿，
but you at least need to sue him.
但你最起码得起诉他。
And my father said, well, you know, I've talked to every lawyer in the city of Atlanta, where we're from, and nobody will take the case.
我爸爸说，我已经跟我们就是住的那个亚特兰大市每一个律师都说过，但是没有人愿意接这个案子。
He said, we can't find a doctor who would be an expert witness to testify against this guy.
他说那些律师都说我们找不到一个就是医生来去做这个证人来去作证的，在法庭上作证的。
And most of the insurance companies have their headquarters in Atlanta, and none of the attorneys in Atlanta want to offend the insurance companies by taking on this case because it means we got to sue them too. Insurance, like health insurance.
Yeah, all the attorneys.
Yeah, the headquarters for these big insurance companies was in Atlanta.
然后在当年的所有的这一些这个大的这个保险公司的这个总部呢，都是在这个亚特兰大。And so what?
So the attorneys in Atlanta didn't want to handle a case that might mean that they would end up losing clients.
Okay. 所以这些律师都不愿意去接这个案子，因为如果接了的话，也可能会去冒犯这个他们自己的客户，失去他们的客户保险公司。
And so when my mom and dad moved back to Atlanta,
所以我爸爸跟妈妈就搬回亚特兰大之后呢
there was only 2 weeks left, almost 2 weeks, in what's called the statute of limitations, meaning you have a time frame within which you can sue.
那么离这个就是最后起诉的这个日子呢，只剩下2周了。
And my father went to see an attorney one more time.
然后我爸爸又去见了一个律师
whose name was Morris Abram.
他的名字叫 Morris Abram。
And Morris had been an attorney in the army during the Nuremberg trials in Germany when they tried the Nazi war criminals.
就是当时他们在审判这个纳粹的这个战犯的时候，然后这个律师也是 he was one of the
attorneys for the U.S. Army that tried these Nazi criminals.
他就当时的这个律师呢是在那个美国的军队服役，那么当时呢他们呢是也是负责审判这个纳粹战犯。
And Morris was from Georgia, from the state of Georgia.
然后Morris 这个律师呢，他也是从乔治亚州来的。
And Atlanta was his home.
亚特兰大是他的家。
Now, he was also a Rhodes Scholar.
Rhodes Scholar?
Rhodes Scholar, which means he was a very smart man, had gone to college in England.
Rhodes Scholar?
Rhodes. R-H-O-D-E-S.
罗德学者是吧？他也是这个罗德学者。
And my father went to him, and of course he was Jewish.
然后我爸爸去找他的，他是犹太人。
You know, and my father went to him, and he, after my father told him the story, he said, "Is everything you've told me absolutely true?"
然后我爸爸就跟他讲了整件事儿，然后他跟我说，你跟我说的这些事儿都完全都是真实的。
And my father said yes, and he said,
是真实的吗？他说，我爸爸说是真实的。
And he handed him a piece of paper on which he had written. He said, my father said, what is this? He said, I'll take the case.
Okay.
I get 1/3 of whatever we make. I get 1/3 of it.
那么，于是呢，他就给了我爸爸一些文件，然后我爸爸说这什么文件？然后他说是这样的，你这个案子我接了，但是最后不管咱们这个打下来这个赔偿金是多少，我要这个拿到您的这个1/3。
And so he took the case. The case lasted 3 years.
然后这个律师就接了这个案子，这个案子一共持续了3年。
From 1954 to 1957.
从54年打到57年。
They had 2 mistrials.
Mistrials.
Meaning 2.
失败的。有2场这个失败的这个审判。
In the 3rd trial, they won.
在第3次这个就是审判的时候呢，就是赢了这个案子。
It was the first neurosurgeon who had ever been sued in the United States.
他呢是这个在美国头一个被起诉的神经外科医师。
And it was the first victory over a doctor in the state of Georgia.
并且是在乔治亚州首例被医生起诉并获胜了的这样的一个案子。
And something really amazing happened.
有些很令人很神奇的事情有发生。
The trial made news. It was in the news.
然后这个审判呢，就是成了新闻。
And people started calling our house.
大家就开始往我们家打电话。
And sending letters to my mother.
并且给我妈妈寄信。
And it turned out that there were dozens and dozens, scores of people who had been either killed or maimed as a result of this doctor.
结果发现了原来就是这个医生经手呢，被他这个因为他死亡的，或者是因为他严重受伤害的这些人，都是有好几十个。
And so my mother's case revealed someone who was evil.
所以我妈妈的这个案子呢，就是向大家揭露了一个很邪恶的人。
Who had been experimenting on people deliberately.
他是在刻意的在这个病人身上做实验的。
In the name of medical science.
他是打着这个医疗的旗号在病人身上做实验。
And when this came out, it was a big deal.
所以这个事情被揭发出来之后，当时是一个很轰动的事。
And Morris, our attorney, told my father, he said, I saw the same thing in Nazi Germany. I never expected to see it in my own backyard.
然后这个负责这个案子的律师 Morris 对我的父亲他说同样的事情我在纳粹德国那边见过，但是我从来没有想到过在我们自己家的后院里面也发生了同样的事。
How about that?
就是这样啊。
Anyway, that's it for tonight.
好，今天晚上课就讲到这儿了。
What's that?
It sounds like Morris is the attorney's name. Like
Morris Abram.
Morris.
M-O-R, I can tell you. Oops, I don't know how to type this in here for some reason.
Morris.
Abram.
Morris. Abram.
I need to send this to everyone. To everyone.
这个是这个医生的名字。
He became the president of Brandeis University later. Brandeis University is one of the top universities in the country.
他后来就成为了那个 Brandeis 大学的这个校长。
And then he was appointed by the president of the United States to be the lifetime ambassador to Switzerland.
后来呢，他在
Yeah.
历史口误啊，同学们。
What did you call him?
doctor。
Oh no, lawyer.
对，那个律师，然后后来还被那个美国总统就是受聘为这个就是瑞士的这个终身的这个大使。
Right. So Morris became a very prominent individual. He was our family attorney for a long time.
所以他这个 Morris 他就成为了一个特别享有声誉的这样的一个人，然后他也是当我们家律师当了很长时间。
Our whole family was very close to the Jewish community. As a result, we were all very close, very friends.
就是因为这样的一个结果呢，我们全家人都和这个整个的犹太社区是非常亲近的。
My first girlfriend was Jewish.
我的第一个女朋友是犹太人。
I was 6 years old.
You were 6.
I was 6, yeah.
当年我6岁。
Yeah. And my first best friend, boyfriend, was also Jewish.
然后我的这个第一个最好的朋友，他也是一个犹太人。
When I was little, I used to go to the synagogue, to the temple with my best friend, and he would go to church with me.
我小的时候呢，常常跟我这个好朋友一块去他们那个犹太教的那个他们那个就朝圣的地方，然後他呢是跟我一块去教堂。
Anyway, Morris wrote a book about this, by the way. There's a whole chapter in his autobiography.
然后这个 Morris 他也去写了这样的一本书，就是自传，然后在他这个书里面有整一章就是在说这个事儿的。
It's a great book. It's a not a big book, but he spent a whole chapter in there just talking about my mom's case. He said it nearly bankrupted his firm. Because it went on for 3 years, and he had to fly up to Canada to interview this Dr. Penfield, and it almost destroyed him, but he kept in there with it.
这个他后来写这本书，当然这书不厚，但是也是挺有内容的一本书。他就讲说，因为接了我妈妈这个案子，他几乎他整个那个律所都破产了。然后因为这个官司打了3年，然后他还飞到加拿大去见那边的那个叫做 Penfield 的这样的一个医生，就整个的这个案子几乎是毁掉了他的这个职业，但是他还是顶住了。
Okay, that's it for now. There's much more to the story, but that's it for tonight.
好，那么这个故事还有很多要讲，但是我们今天晚上就先讲到这儿。
Okay, all right. Oops.